Hello and welcome to the 2019-2020 Hope Hospice Employee Benefits webinar. Over the next 15 or 20 minutes, we'll be scrolling through all of the benefits listed here at the top of this page: medical, HSAs, dental, vision, life insurance, disability insurance, in addition to a flexible spending account and an EAP or employee assistance program. A couple of rules of the road before we get started. These bullet points right here are reasons you can change your election in the middle of the year. So in general, what you pick during your open enrollment window sticks for 1 year unless you have one of these qualified life events. This year, we're going to continue with Blue Cross Blue Shield. The network is the Blue Choice PPO network, and the plan year begins May 1st. But always remember that all deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums go from January to December. So those always reset at the end of December and begin again in the middle of January. We didn't make any plan design changes, which we think is a good thing, over last year. There are 3 different plans. The first plan is an HSA plan. The next plan is a PPO plan, and the buy-up option is also a PPO. We'll go through some examples in this presentation of what that could look like, but in general, here's how this thing works. You have a $3,000 deductible on the HSA when you go into a hospital, so that's your responsibility to meet before the plan starts paying. But you also have a $3,000 out-of-pocket maximum, which means that if you're in the hospital and you meet your $3,000 deductible, that you've also met your individual out-of-pocket maximum. Now, when you go to the doctor at an office visit and the bill, let's say, is $200 bill charge, you'll get a network discount of, let's just say, $100. Then you'd have a bill charge minus a network discount, and then the remainder of that balance would be what you would owe. So on an HSA, when you go to the doctor, you're going to be paying that discounted rate, but it's not going to be on a copay. A copay, for example, is a discounted rate when you use it. You do have a copay for virtual visits. So that's MD Live, 24/7, 365 access to a doctor on an app or a computer. Pretty slick service. I've used a service like this many times, especially for those of you who have kiddos. But in general, everything that you're going to spend on an HSA is going to go towards the deductible and the out-of-pocket max. You don't have copays on an HSA except for the virtual visit feature. On a PPO, you do have copays. So you'll spend $35 or $70 if you go to an office visit. If you go to a retail clinic, you'll have $35. Virtual visit is a little cheaper. The deductible on an individual basis here is $500 cheaper. And the out-of-pocket maximum actually on this plan is a little higher. So you would want this plan if you wanted the convenience of paying a copay when you go into the doctor, as opposed to the discounted rate on the HSA plan. When you go to the doctor or get a prescription on the HSA plan as compared to the base plan, those costs are going to be higher. But when you're on one of these 2 PPO plans, when you go to the doctor or when you fill a prescription, you're just going to be having these copays here. Those are the biggest differences that separate one plan from another. And again, we'll go over some more specific examples in a minute. Now, here's the cost. So we want you to see the monthly premium. This is what Blue Cross Blue Shield charges Hope Hospice. And you'll also see what Hope's monthly contribution is to each of these plans. This is a very, very high amount of employer contribution. It's an exceedingly generous plan. Especially, it's hard to get much better than this $0 out of pocket for the employee-only tier. We also want you to take a look at the app. The app for Blue Cross Blue Shield is pretty slick. You can find an in-network doctor, you can find a hospital, get all sorts of questions answered. So make sure you download their app if you haven't. This is the MD Live, 24/7, 365. I love this thing for aches, sprains, pains, seasonal allergies, things like that. Make sure and either call them or download their app as well. Now, here's what I referenced earlier. For the sake of time in this webinar, we're not going to go through every single example, but I'd like for you to reference it later so that you can make the most informed decision. You've got 3 different examples here. This first is having a baby. And so here's my disclaimer. These are sample and representative costs. Actual costs at the hospital may differ, and they likely will, but this is a pretty decent ballpark number at what you would be looking at for a baby with a normal delivery. So I'd like for you to reference those elsewhere. One thing I didn't point out when we talked a little bit earlier about the HSA is that Hope Hospice gives $100 a month towards the HSA. That's a bank account in your name, so that offsets any cost of going to the doctor or getting a prescription, or if you don't use it, then that bank account balance builds up. These are great points here. Consider what your annual medical expenses are. Consider if you're paying more in premiums than your out-of-pocket responsibility under the plan. And then always know what your worst case scenario is. Worst case scenario in the insurance world of benefits means out-of-pocket maximum. That's per person on an annual basis. So you'll see actually the out-of-pocket maximums are higher on these 2 PPO plans. And that is because you're paying a copay. You're paying a discounted rate for doctors and prescriptions when you actually use it. But if you go into a hospital, your liability is actually higher on one of those plans. Here's a second example of the same 3 plans. The second example is managing type 2 diabetes. Same considerations at the bottom, what are your annual expenses, etc. But you can see how different representative costs would accrue depending on each plan. Now here's this health savings account. This is only for the HSA plan. It cannot be attached to either of the 2 PPO plans. And Hope Hospice actually puts in $100 a month. That also is really, really generous. You can payroll deduct monies in addition to that $1,200 a year or $100 a month up to these 2 limits. If you're enrolled in self-only coverage, you can put up to $3,500. Now that would also include the $1,200 from Hope, so you'd be putting in the difference. Or if you're on family coverage, you can put more in. An HSA is simply a bank account in your name that is reserved for medical, dental, or vision expenses. Now, here's where the language becomes confusing, so I'm going to attempt to simplify it. Voluntary supplemental benefit plans, that's a lot of adjectives. Here's what it means. These are policies that are paid for 100% by you, and they're really aimed at 2 different targets. Number 1, an accident policy. I'll give you a great example. My daughter was at church recently, and she was running after a ball with a little boy. And the little boy, like some little boys could do, in the heat of the moment, was running after that ball and shoved her right out of the way. And I was actually watching this happen, and I thought, ooh, that might hurt when she fell down. Well, she ended up breaking her arm. The little boy did apologize. He was very remorseful, so we got that done too. But she had to go to an urgent care clinic and then to an orthopedist. So all those bills I take back to my accident policy carrier, which is a carrier just like Allstate. I take those bills, I send them in, and they have predefined and set limits for an amount of cash that that injury will produce, and they send money to my mailbox. I like a 24-hour accident policy. Not everybody does, but for examples just like that, I'm going to get some money in my mailbox. I don't know how much exactly. I haven't turned in all of my bills yet, but it's coming towards me. Critical illness. So these are biggest one is really cancer, honestly. I'm scrolling through right here the voluntary accident amounts that you would receive depending on the injury, and I'm scrolling to this critical illness because critical illness can be heart attack, stroke, organ transplant, end-stage renal or kidney failure, coronary artery bypass, things like that. Also included is cancer. So you pay for those by age, and the only difference is tobacco or non-tobacco. So if you have a concern based on family history of one of those illnesses, then this may be a decent policy to consider. Here's a good reference guide simply to remind you of this one fact. Don't go to an emergency room unless it's life or limb threatening. There are freestanding emergency rooms popping up all over the place. That is an emergency room outside of a hospital. And just to make it perfectly confusing, sometimes there are urgent care providers and ER providers in the same building. So if you don't know which door you're walking in, if you need to go to an urgent care provider and you actually go to a freestanding ER, you're going to end up with a big old bill for a freestanding emergency room. So know where you go. Some of the changes that we did make heading into this year were for the ancillary lines of insurance coverage. Ancillary just means anything but medical. So we've got Mutual of Omaha, who is the new dental carrier. Here's the network, mutually preferred, and here's essentially how it works. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you go in for your preventative services, 0% deductible waive. That's a freebie to you. Anytime you see 0%, that's a good number. But let's say the dentist finds a cavity, something like a basic service. And let's say that cavity costs $200. Here's how the math works. $200 minus 50, that's your individual deductible. There's a $150 bill left. It's a basic service, so 20% is shared with the insurance company. So you're only paying 20%, they're paying 80% of the balance after the deductible, meaning $200 bill minus $150 individual deductible means $150 bill. I'm paying 20% of $150 or $30, and the insurance company is paying 80% of that $150 or $120, and that $120 they just paid posts against this $1,500 annual maximum. Now that's per person. So if you've got 3 kids, 1 spouse, everybody gets $1,500 a year. Now, if any of you have ever been through major surgery, my bride of 14 years, 1 year had 2 root canals and 2 apicoectomies in 1 year. And that was a very difficult year because she was in a lot of dental pain. I was in a lot of spiritual and emotional pain and financial pain because it was so costly. So if you know that those expenses are coming up, you can address that in one of 2 ways. You can either set aside extra money on your HSA card, or if you're on one of the 2 PPO plans, the 2 PPO Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, then you can set aside money in your flexible spending account. And we'll talk about that a little more later. Now, again, here's the monthly premium. Here's Hope's monthly contribution. And then here is the net result of your cost. Very, very generous. We don't see it much anymore where an employer is this generous towards their employees. So you can thank your leadership team and the board for continuing to be generous. Now let's talk about your eyes. Here's the biggest thing that's confusing, okay? It's this area right here. This means you can't get glasses and contacts in the same year, paid for by insurance. It's an either or. You're either going to choose to get the $130 for frames, $10 copay for lenses. Now here's my caveat. If you're as blind as me, you're not getting out for a $10 copay. If you have good vision like my bride, then you might be able to get out with lenses for a $10 copay. If you choose to do all of this stuff like I have to do because I have to shrink my glasses down just to fit on my face, I pay above and beyond the $10 copay for those, okay? So you've either got frames and lenses or contact lenses. They'll give you $130, either or, each year. This freight is on you. It's not much, and so I don't think anybody's going to have to go get anxiety pills just to be able to afford this. It's pretty reasonable premium for the benefit received. Now let's talk about life insurance. First of all, who doesn't love free stuff? It's free to you, paid for by Hope Hospice. Now, when you go in and enroll via Employee Navigator, I do want you to remember to choose your beneficiary. That's who catches the football, so to speak. If you're not holding it anymore, it's got to go somewhere. So this is a freebie to you. You get it just by showing up and being a great employee. Now, this is a busy slide and it's kind of confusing. Let me simplify it. This is if you want more insurance. If you want more insurance that you pay for, that's what voluntary life, accidental death, and dismemberment. That's more, and it is in addition to the $50,000 that Hope buys for you. Here's how it works. The first time that you're eligible, which is everybody right now, you have this thing called guarantee issue. Guarantee issue means no medical questions asked. Ain't nobody asking about your business. So you can get up to $100,000 one time only, first time, with no medical questions asked. If you want up to $300,000, it's okay. It just means they're going to ask you some medical questions. And so you determine the rate by your age and this number right here. So you can use these examples to calculate a quick cost per paycheck. That way you can see if you want more life insurance. It's not super expensive, but only buy it if you would like it. Disability insurance. Check this out. First of all, the most expensive one is free to you. I love this. This is so rare, and this ain't cheap. Here's what disability insurance does. It is insurance on your paycheck. I say that because it protects up to 60% of your pre-disability earnings for different periods of time. Let's start on the long haul. Long-term disability, 60% of pre-disability earnings up to a monthly benefit of $5,000 a month. Free to you. This is your sleep at night factor. God forbid you are disabled and cannot come back to work in any capacity, then you have an insurance policy protecting up to 60% of your pre-disability earnings. Now, for a shorter period of time, up to 11 weeks, then you have short-term disability. This is actually a benefit enhancement. You have more benefit available to you now than you did last year. Now, here's how you calculate short-term disability. Here's the cost per paycheck right there. And when you go online, you'll also be able to move a button and see how much this is. But if you want to do some quick back of the napkin math, here's a rate table to be able to do that. Short-term disability protects up to $1,500 a week for up to 11 weeks. Yes, pregnancy is considered a disability under a short-term disability policy. Employee assistance program. This also is 100% free to you. And we've actually been using this in a really healthy way. It is confidential counseling and referral services designed to help with anything personal, job, or family related. And you get up to 6 face-to-face sessions. This is a great assistance program. Most assistance programs are honestly not very good. This one through Alliance is very, very healthy. Premium only plan just means your premiums come out without tax. Hopefully that's the way that you like it, because nobody wants to pay more tax than they need to. Now, let's talk about an FSA. Okay, if you are on one of the 2 PPO plans, you are eligible to enroll in the flexible spending account. If you're enrolled in the health savings account, or the least expensive option under Blue Cross Blue Shield, you are not eligible for the flexible spending account. HSA and FSA don't play in the sandbox together. So you got to be on one of the PPO plans. And here's how an FSA works. When I was growing up, we would go to Walmart and we'd look at the bike, and then mom would say something like, Santa's going to have to work for that bike, and we would do it on layaway. So we would pay for it and then we'd get the bike. FSA is kind of like reverse layaway. You get the bike first and then you pay for it later. For example, if you elect to put $2,700 a year into your FSA account, you get a debit card that has $2,700 on it, but you hadn't paid anything for it. You payroll deduct that $2,700 out equally over time. That's how it works. So you get all the money up front, but then you pay for it later. You get the bike first and then pay for it later. But here's the gotcha. If you don't use that money, then you lose it. That's set by the IRS. That information will be right in here. But if you don't use the money, then you lose it. It does have a use it or lose it rule. So there's some detail in the middle here. It's essentially a tax vehicle to reduce your taxable income so you can pay for benefits that you need, but just remember, you have got to spend down that balance. So this is a great vehicle to drive, so to speak, if you have planned medical expenses. Unplanned medical expenses, this is not a great vehicle to use. The rest of the information is great late night reading material, required notices. We'll let y'all read through those at your leisure. So I'm scrolling pretty quickly through here. Here's some Q&A. This is a good page to reference. Tina Berger in our office is absolutely fabulous. My name's Ben. I work with Catto&Catto. We're insurance nerds and brokers. And so we support Hope Hospice all throughout the year with anything insurance related. So questions, comments, claims problems, we'd love for those to come to us. Aja is super capable. She knows all of this stuff as well. You can also hound her with questions, but please let us know what you need from us because we want to make sure that you get great customer service. Now, a couple of things. I want you to go to hopehospice.employeenavigator.com. That's where you're going to say your yeses and nos. It's going to be kind of like an Amazon shopping experience. Do you want medical? Yes, it'll populate the cost. Do you want dental? Yes or no, it'll populate the cost. And then by the end of it, you'll be able to move through all of your elections and you'll see exactly what's coming out of your paycheck. Biggest things are register as a new user first. You'll provide first name, last name, company identifier, PIN, and it'll walk you through how you get in the first time, and then it'll let you set your password, one that you would actually remember at a future point. You'll move through all of those elections, and we're here to support you in that process as well. I'm scrolling back because if you have any questions, let Tina know and she'll get one of our representatives who built out Employee Navigator on y'all's behalf to be able to answer any questions that might come up. That will conclude the employee benefits presentation. If you're still listening, thanks for hanging in there and have a great year of benefits.